Men over 60, the best testosterone-boosting superfoods your wife will notice. Gentlemen, you read that right. We're talking about foods so powerful, so packed with the right nutrients that they can help you feel younger, stronger, and more alive. And yes, your wife may notice the change before you do. Now, I know some of you are nodding your heads already, thinking, of course, testosterone is everything for a man over 60. And others might be raising an eyebrow, saying, "Come on, Doc, you really think a few foods can make a difference at my age?" Well, stick with me, because I'm about to show you the science, the real-life stories, and the surprising truth that can change how you feel, look, and perform in ways you might have thought were long gone. What if I told you your low energy, your softer muscles, even that extra belly fat might not be just old age, but a direct result of something you can improve? What if I told you that with the right approach, you could reclaim a big part of the man you used to be without pills, without gimmicks, just by making smarter choices in the kitchen? Over the next few minutes, we're going to break down exactly why testosterone matters more than ever after 60. The science of how food can work with your body to raise it naturally. And then we'll count down the top 10 testosterone-boosting superfoods. Number 1 is a shocker that's been celebrated for centuries. But before we dive in, do me a favor, hit that like button, share this video with a friend who could use the boost, and don't forget to subscribe. That way we can keep bringing you more of these life-changing, science-backed tips to help you feel your absolute best at any age. All right, get ready, because in just a moment, we're going to start with something most men never fully understand: why testosterone after 60 can be the difference between just surviving and truly thriving. Let's get started. Why testosterone matters after 60. Before we get into the list of superfoods, let's get one thing straight. Testosterone is not just the reproductive hormones. It's the master switch for how you feel as a man. It's the strength in your handshake, the focus you have when you're working on a project, the steady energy to enjoy a hike with your wife or toss a football with your grandkids. And yes, it's the spark that keeps intimacy alive in your marriage. Starting around age 30, testosterone begins to decline about 1 to 2% each year. That might not sound like much, but by the time you're 60, you could be operating at half the testosterone you had in your 20s. Research from the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism shows that men over 60 have on average 31% lower total testosterone and nearly 50% less free testosterone, the form your body can actually use, compared to men in their early 30s. When levels drop, the signs can be hard to ignore. Muscle starts to fade while belly fat creeps in. That extra weight around your midsection isn't just cosmetic. It produces an enzyme called aromatase, which converts testosterone into estrogen, making the problem worse. Energy dips, brain fog sets in, motivation wanes, and intimacy becomes less frequent or satisfying. But here's the thing: low testosterone isn't a life sentence. In my 35 years as a physician, I've seen men in their late 60s and 70s make dramatic turnarounds, not with risky medications, but with smart lifestyle changes. Studies, including a 2020 Nutrients Journal meta-analysis, confirm that diets rich in zinc, vitamin D, magnesium, and healthy fats can help maintain healthy testosterone levels. Combine that with strength training, quality sleep, and stress management, and you have a natural, powerful approach to feeling younger and stronger. So ask yourself, if you could wake up with more energy, sharper focus, stronger muscles, and a renewed drive for life, wouldn't it be worth making a few changes starting today? Keep listening, because the foods we're about to cover could be the first step in making that happen. The science of food and testosterone. Your body is a high-performance machine, and testosterone is one of its key fuels. To make it, you need the right raw materials: zinc, vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, amino acids, and antioxidants. Without these, your hormone factory can't run at full capacity. Zinc plays a major role in testosterone synthesis, and research in nutrition shows that even mild zinc deficiency can cause a noticeable drop in levels within months. Vitamin D, technically a hormone, has been linked in multiple Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism studies to higher testosterone in men. Omega-3s from fatty fish reduce inflammation and improve cell health, creating an environment where testosterone can thrive, while amino acids from quality proteins support muscle mass, which helps maintain healthy hormone levels. But nutrients alone aren't enough. The right foods also fight inflammation, improve circulation, and regulate insulin, 3 factors that directly affect testosterone production. Chronic inflammation can disrupt hormone production at the source, poor blood flow limits nutrient delivery to the testes, and unstable blood sugar can throw your hormonal balance off completely. A 2018 review in the Journal of Steroid Biochemistry and Molecular Biology found that men with metabolic syndrome, a condition tied to insulin resistance, almost always have lower testosterone, while dietary improvements often reverse that trend. So every meal you eat is either helping or hurting your testosterone. Are you giving your body what it needs to keep you strong, sharp, and energized? In just a moment, we'll count down the top 10 testosterone-boosting foods, each backed by science, to help you take charge of your hormonal health. The top 10 testosterone-boosting superfoods. Number 10. Dark chocolate, 85% cocoa. Yes, chocolate can be good for your testosterone, but only the real kind, not the candy bars loaded with sugar and milk solids. We're talking about dark chocolate with at least 85% cocoa content. This type of chocolate is rich in antioxidants like flavonoids, which improve blood vessel function and support healthy circulation, an essential factor for both heart health and sexual performance. It's also a solid source of magnesium, a mineral that plays a critical role in regulating testosterone levels. In fact, a study published in the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition found that men who supplemented with magnesium experienced measurable increases in testosterone, especially when combined with regular exercise. Beyond the lab data, I've seen this in practice. One of my patients, a 62-year-old former firefighter, had been struggling with low energy and reduced motivation to exercise. We made a few dietary tweaks, including replacing his nightly sugary dessert with 2 small squares of high-quality dark chocolate. Within a few months, his blood pressure improved, his workout recovery felt easier, and yes, his testosterone levels moved upward. Dark chocolate also contains compounds that help reduce cortisol, your body's main stress hormone. High cortisol can suppress testosterone production, so managing stress isn't just about peace of mind. It's about hormone balance, too. The bitterness of real dark chocolate naturally discourages overeating, which means you can enjoy it without the sugar spikes that harm your metabolism. So here's something to think about. Could a small, intentional indulgence each evening actually be part of a smarter health strategy? 2 squares of dark chocolate savored slowly after dinner might just satisfy your sweet tooth while giving your hormones a subtle but meaningful boost. It's a simple, enjoyable choice. Are you making it? Number 9. Ginger. Ginger is far more than a simple kitchen spice. It's a medicinal root with a history that goes back thousands of years in both Eastern and Western medicine. Modern science is now catching up to what traditional healers already knew. Ginger can support hormonal health in men. A 2012 study published in the Tikrit Medical Journal found that daily ginger supplementation increased testosterone by up to 17% in infertile men. Researchers believe it works through multiple pathways. By improving blood circulation, enhancing the body's natural antioxidant defenses, and reducing oxidative stress in the testes, where testosterone is produced. Better circulation means more oxygen and nutrients reach these hormone-producing tissues, and less oxidative stress means they can function more efficiently. I've recommended ginger to many of my patients over the years, often alongside other dietary improvements, and the results can be impressive. One man in his late 60s, dealing with fatigue and low motivation, began drinking a simple ginger tea each morning. Freshly grated ginger steeped in hot water with a slice of lemon and a bit of raw honey. Within a couple of months, he reported not only better energy, but also improved stamina during his daily walks, and his follow-up blood work showed a modest but meaningful bump in testosterone. Ginger is versatile and easy to incorporate into your diet. You can add it to stir-fries, blend it into smoothies, brew it as tea, or mix grated ginger with honey as a natural tonic. And here's something to consider. If such a simple, inexpensive, and natural ingredient can have measurable effects on circulation, inflammation, and hormone balance, what might happen if you made it a regular part of your routine? Number 8. Avocados. Avocados are more than just a trendy brunch item. They are a nutrient powerhouse, especially for men looking to support healthy testosterone levels. Rich in monounsaturated fats, the kind that nourish your heart and hormone production, avocados help maintain the cholesterol balance your body needs to create testosterone. They're also loaded with vitamin E, a potent antioxidant shown to improve sperm quality, protect reproductive tissues from oxidative damage, and support overall sexual health. In fact, research in the International Journal of Andrology has linked higher vitamin E intake with better sperm motility and lower DNA fragmentation. In my practice, I've seen men benefit from simply swapping processed snacks for avocado-based meals. One patient, a 65-year-old retired teacher, began adding half an avocado to his breakfast every day, sometimes sliced over eggs, sometimes mashed on whole grain toast. Over time, his cholesterol profile improved, His energy stayed steadier throughout the day, and his lab results showed healthier testosterone levels. The high potassium content in avocados also supports cardiovascular health by helping control blood pressure, which indirectly benefits erectile function and hormone delivery throughout the body. They are incredibly versatile. Slice them into salads, blend them into smoothies, spread them on toast, or just enjoy them with a sprinkle of salt and pepper. And here's a question worth asking yourself. If one creamy, satisfying food could nourish your heart, protect your reproductive health, and help keep your testosterone where it should be, why wouldn't you make it a staple in your kitchen? Number 7. Nuts and seeds. Almonds, walnuts, and pumpkin seeds are more than just convenient snacks. They're concentrated sources of testosterone-friendly nutrients. They are rich in healthy fats that provide the raw materials for hormone production, zinc that's essential for testosterone synthesis, and magnesium that helps keep testosterone bioavailable in the body. Zinc deficiency has been linked to significantly lower testosterone levels, while magnesium has been shown in biological trace element research to raise free testosterone, especially in active men. Walnuts also provide plant-based omega-3 fatty acids, which reduce inflammation and support cardiovascular health, both critical for optimal hormone delivery. I've seen remarkable improvements in patients who make nuts and seeds a regular part of their diet. One of my patients, a 61-year-old accountant, swapped his afternoon chips for a small bag of mixed almonds and pumpkin seeds. After a few months, he noticed more consistent energy in the afternoons, better workout recovery, and even a slight reduction in waist size. His follow-up labs confirmed an uptick in testosterone and better blood sugar control. That's not surprising. Nuts and seeds are low-glycemic foods, so they won't spike your blood sugar or insulin levels, both of which can negatively impact testosterone over time. Pumpkin seeds, in particular, deserve special mention for their high zinc content and presence of phytosterols, which may help balance hormones and improve prostate health. Almonds bring vitamin E to the table, while walnuts offer antioxidants that protect cells from oxidative stress. The key is moderation. A small handful a day is enough, and choosing raw or lightly roasted varieties without heavy salt or sugar. So here's something to think about. If a simple, portable snack could fuel your body with the building blocks of testosterone while keeping your heart and metabolism in check, wouldn't it be an easy change to make? Number 6. Pomegranates. Pomegranates aren't just beautiful to look at. They are loaded with compounds that can directly benefit testosterone and overall vitality. Rich in antioxidants, particularly polyphenols, they help protect blood vessels, improve circulation, and reduce oxidative stress, all of which are critical for healthy hormone production. In a well-known study from Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh, men who drank pomegranate juice daily for 2 weeks saw their salivary testosterone levels rise by an average of 24%. Just as notable, they reported better mood and increased motivation, which often go hand in hand with improved hormonal balance. From a physiological standpoint, better blood flow means more oxygen and nutrient delivery to the testes, where testosterone is made. Antioxidants in pomegranates also help protect nitric oxide, a molecule that keeps blood vessels relaxed and open, important not only for heart health, but also for erectile function. I've had patients incorporate pomegranate juice into their breakfast routine or toss fresh seeds onto salads, and many have noticed a difference in both energy and endurance within a few weeks. One man in his late 60s told me he started looking forward to his morning workouts again after making this change, something he hadn't felt in years. The key is to go for the real thing, fresh juice or whole seeds, not the sugar-heavy bottled varieties that strip away most of the benefits. You can enjoy the seeds sprinkled over yogurt, blended into smoothies, or eaten on their own for a refreshing, nutrient-packed snack. So ask yourself this. If one vibrant fruit could support your heart, improve your circulation, and give your testosterone a natural lift, why wouldn't you make it part of your daily routine? Number 5. Spinach and leafy greens. Spinach, kale, and Swiss chard are nutritional powerhouses, especially when it comes to supporting testosterone. They're loaded with magnesium, a mineral that plays a critical role in hundreds of biochemical reactions, including hormone regulation. Magnesium doesn't just help produce testosterone. It also reduces the binding of testosterone to SHBG, or reproductive hormones binding globulin, which means more of your testosterone remains in its free, active form. A study published in Biological Trace Element Research found that men who consumed higher levels of magnesium had significantly greater free and total testosterone, and the effect was even stronger in men who exercised regularly. Leafy greens bring more to the table than magnesium. They're also rich in nitrates, which the body converts into nitric oxide, a compound that relaxes blood vessels, improving circulation and nutrient delivery to the testes and muscles. Better blood flow supports not just hormone production, but also physical performance and recovery. I've had patients in their 60s add a daily green smoothie or a hearty spinach salad to their lunch and report more sustained energy, improved workouts, and even better sleep quality within weeks. One retired construction worker told me that after replacing his usual sandwich with a spinach and kale salad topped with grilled chicken, he not only felt lighter on his feet, but also noticed he was sleeping more deeply. It's easy to work more leafy greens into your day. Toss a handful into an omelet, blend them into a smoothie with berries, or sauté them with garlic and olive oil for a quick side dish. And here's a thought worth considering. If a simple plate of greens can nourish your muscles, improve your circulation, and keep your testosterone working at its best, why not make it a daily habit? Number 4, lean red meat, grass-fed. A quality cut of lean red meat isn't just a treat for the taste buds. It's a nutritional package that can directly support testosterone and overall vitality. Grass-fed beef in particular offers a superior fat profile compared to grain-fed, with higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids and conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, both of which have anti-inflammatory properties that support hormone balance. It's also rich in creatine, which boosts muscular strength and performance, high-quality protein for muscle repair, heme iron for efficient oxygen transport, and vitamin B12 for nerve health and energy metabolism. From a hormonal standpoint, adequate protein and micronutrient intake help maintain lean muscle mass, which is linked to higher testosterone in aging men. Iron and B12 deficiencies can lead to fatigue and decreased physical performance, both of which can indirectly drag down testosterone. A study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that men with higher intakes of quality animal protein had better muscle retention and hormonal profiles as they aged. In my own practice, I've seen men benefit from replacing processed meats like deli cuts and hot dogs with modest servings of grass-fed steak or lean ground beef. One patient in his late 50s started including a palm-sized portion of grass-fed sirloin twice a week, alongside plenty of vegetables. Within months, he reported feeling stronger during resistance training, and his follow-up labs showed a modest increase in testosterone along with improved iron levels. The key here is moderation. About 2 to 3 servings a week is enough to gain the benefits without overloading on saturated fat. Pairing your steak with leafy greens or fiber-rich vegetables also supports heart health and digestion. So here's a question worth chewing on. If a responsibly sourced, nutrient-packed piece of steak can help you maintain strength, stamina, and healthy hormone levels, isn't it time to rethink how red meat fits into your diet? Number 3, fatty fish. Salmon, mackerel, and sardines are more than just flavorful additions to your plate. They are some of the richest natural sources of omega-3 fatty acids and vitamin D, 2 nutrients deeply tied to testosterone health. Omega-3s play a key role in reducing inflammation, improving cell membrane function, and supporting cardiovascular health, all of which create a better internal environment for hormone production. Vitamin D, often called the sunshine vitamin, functions in the body as a steroid hormone. Studies published in the Hormone and Metabolic Research Journal have shown that men with adequate vitamin D levels tend to have significantly higher testosterone compared to those who are deficient. Fatty fish also supply high-quality protein and essential amino acids that help preserve lean muscle mass, important because muscle tissue supports higher testosterone output. In my experience, men who consistently include fatty fish in their diet often report better energy, sharper mental focus, and more endurance in physical activities. I recall a 64-year-old patient who swapped his usual fried chicken lunches for grilled salmon twice a week. Within a few months, not only did his triglycerides improve, but his follow-up labs revealed a notable boost in testosterone and vitamin D levels. Another advantage of fatty fish is their natural content of selenium, a trace mineral that supports reproductive health and sperm quality. Sardines, in particular, pack a powerful punch of both omega-3s and selenium in a convenient, affordable package. The key is consistency. Aiming for 2 to 3 servings of fatty fish each week can make a meaningful difference over time. So here's a thought. If one delicious, nutrient-dense meal can feed your heart, brain, and testosterone all at once, why wouldn't you start planning it into your week right now? Number 2, eggs. Eggs are one of nature's most complete foods, and when it comes to supporting testosterone, they check multiple boxes. They contain cholesterol, the raw material your body uses to produce testosterone, along with vitamin D, high-quality protein, and essential amino acids for muscle repair and hormone balance. Contrary to outdated beliefs, moderate egg consumption does not significantly raise harmful cholesterol levels in healthy individuals. In fact, a review in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that dietary cholesterol from eggs had little impact on cardiovascular risk for most people. The yolk, often unfairly avoided, is actually where most of the nutrients are. Vitamin D, vitamin B12, selenium, and choline, all crucial for hormone production, brain health, and energy metabolism. In practice, I've seen remarkable results from something as simple as reintroducing whole eggs into the diet. One of my patients, a 59-year-old avid cyclist, had been avoiding egg yolks for years out of fear of cholesterol. When he began eating 2 whole eggs for breakfast most mornings, sometimes scrambled with spinach, sometimes boiled with a side of avocado, he not only felt more satiated through the day, but also showed improved testosterone levels and better workout recovery within 3 months. Eggs are also incredibly versatile and easy to prepare, scrambled, poached, boiled, or even baked into a frittata with vegetables. Pairing them with a source of healthy fat, like olive oil or avocado, can further support nutrient absorption. So here's something worth asking yourself. If a quick, affordable, and nutrient-packed breakfast could fuel your muscles, sharpen your mind, and give your testosterone a lift, why wouldn't you make it part of your morning routine? Number 1. Oysters. Oysters are rightly called the king of testosterone-boosting foods, and for good reason. They contain more zinc per serving than any other food you can eat. Zinc is not just helpful, it's absolutely essential for testosterone production, playing a direct role in the enzyme activity that converts cholesterol into testosterone. Deficiency in zinc can lead to a rapid and dramatic drop in testosterone levels, a fact backed by research published in Nutrition. In that study, men with low zinc intake experienced a significant decline in testosterone within just 20 weeks, while supplementation restored levels. But oysters bring more to the table than zinc. They're also rich in selenium, copper, vitamin B12, and high-quality protein, all of which support reproductive health, sperm quality, and overall vitality. Their unique nutrient profile promotes healthy blood flow, which is critical for both hormone delivery and sexual performance. Historically, oysters have had a romantic reputation. Casanova was said to eat dozens a day, and modern science gives that legend credibility by linking zinc and other oyster nutrients to improved libido and fertility. In my own practice, I've had patients experiment with incorporating oysters into their diet, fresh on the half-shell, lightly grilled, or even added to seafood stews. One man in his early 60s who had chronically low zinc levels began eating oysters twice a week. Within a few months, his lab work showed a clear rise in testosterone, and he reported improved energy, quicker post-workout recovery, and a renewed interest in intimacy. If oysters aren't readily available or you're not a fan of their texture, there are other zinc-rich foods and quality supplements, but none match the bioavailability and nutrient density of fresh oysters. So ask yourself this: if one indulgent, nutrient-packed seafood could help restore your vitality, strengthen your hormonal foundation, and keep you feeling younger, wouldn't it be worth making room for it on your plate? So, gentlemen, there you have it. Why testosterone matters more than ever after 60, the science behind how food can boost it naturally, and the top 10 testosterone-boosting superfoods your wife will notice. Remember, this isn't just about libido. It's about energy, strength, mental clarity, and living your life with purpose. Small, consistent choices in your diet and lifestyle can make a big difference, even if you think your best years are behind you. I've seen it in my patients, and you can experience it too. Start with one change. Maybe it's adding more leafy greens, swapping out processed snacks for nuts and seeds, or making salmon a weekly staple. Each of these steps is an investment in the man you want to be for the years ahead. If you found value in this video, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with a friend or family member who could use the boost, and subscribe so you won't miss the science-backed tips we've got coming your way. Your engagement helps us keep creating content that can truly change lives. Thanks for watching, gentlemen. Take care of yourself, take charge of your health, and I'll see you in the next video.